Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're getting into some pretty radical economic ideas from economist Richard Murphy. And trust me, they might just challenge everything you thought you knew about how government spending, debt, and taxes actually work.
Okay, so let's just jump right in with a big question that kind of turns everything we hear on the news completely on its head. The whole idea we're exploring here suggests that a government trying to balance its books isn't just misguided, it could actually be doing real harm.
So, you might be wondering, where do we even get this idea? Well, it all comes down to a really common analogy, comparing a whole country's economy to a simple household budget. But as we're about to see, that comparison doesn't just wobble, it completely collapses. And this right here is why. It's so clear when you put it side by side. For a household on the left, it's simple, right? You have to earn money before you can spend it. But a nation that controls its own currency, it literally creates the money it spends. And get this, when a household cuts back, that's saving. But when a government cuts back, that money doesn't just disappear. It's income that's taken away from a person or a business.
This quote from economist Richard Murphy just sums it up perfectly. A national economy isn't just a bigger version of your family's finances, it's practically the mirror opposite. And really getting your head around that idea is the key to understanding all the stuff that comes next.
All right, let's move on to another big one, inflation. We're always told that it's this terrible economic boogeyman that we have to fight at all costs. But what if a little bit of inflation isn't just okay? What if it's actually a good thing?
You've probably heard this number before. Most of the world's big central banks, like the Bank of England or the Fed in the US, have a target for inflation. And that target is almost always 2%.
But here's the thing that's kind of wild. According to Murphy, nobody really has a solid reason for why it's 2%. It's basically an arbitrary number. There's no great economic theory that says 2% is the perfect sweet spot and say 3 or 4% would be a disaster. It's a target that he argues has become this self-imposed trap.
And check this out. This shows a hidden benefit of inflation in action. Murphy talks about his own first apartment back in 1983. Now, over the years, his wages went up with inflation, but the amount of his mortgage debt, that stayed exactly the same. So, in real terms, inflation was actually shrinking his debt for him. It was helping him pay it off. For a whole generation of homeowners, it was a huge, unseen force for wealth redistribution. Okay, so if the household budget is a myth, and a little bit of inflation might actually be our friend, what's the alternative? Well, that brings us to the whole framework behind these ideas, modern monetary theory, or MMT for short. Now, it's really important to understand this point. Murphy argues that MMT isn't some new political agenda or a utopian plan. He says it's just a description of how the monetary system already works in countries like the UK, the US, or Japan. It's not a theory of what should be, it's an observation of what is. And he even says it's a reality that most central bankers would agree with behind closed doors.
So a huge piece of this puzzle is knowing where money actually comes from. Most of us think that banks take in savings from one person and then lend that same money out to someone else. But that's not what happens. When you get a loan, the bank just creates new money. They type on a keyboard and poof, a loan appears as an asset for them and a deposit appears in your account. The money supply literally just expanded.
So the story we always hear, right? It goes like this. The government collects taxes from all of us, puts it into a giant pot of taxpayer money, and then decides how to spend what's in the pot. It's the foundation of pretty much every political debate about spending.
But MMT completely flips that script. In this view, a government that creates its own currency spends the money into the economy first. So why do we even have taxes then? Well, two big reasons. First, it forces us all to need the currency. You've got to get pounds to pay your taxes, right? And second, taxes are like the economy's thermostat. They pull money out of the system to cool things down and stop inflation from getting out of control.
Okay, this all leads to a really big and obvious question. If the government can just create money, why do we always hear politicians worrying about what the bond markets will think? Why are they so afraid of them?
Well, Murphy argues we're looking at this all wrong. Government bonds aren't a sign of desperate borrowing. Think of them more like a service. They're basically just ultra-safe savings accounts that the government offers to massive institutions, like your pension fund, that have billions of dollars and need a secure place to park it.
And if you look at who actually owns all this government debt, it's pretty revealing. It's not some shadowy group of foreign lenders holding the country hostage.
As you can see from the biggest chunks of this chart, it's mostly the Bank of England itself and our very own pension funds and insurance companies. They want to own this debt because it's so safe.
And that brings us to this crucial point. The whole power dynamic is the complete opposite of what we're usually told. These big financial institutions need the government to provide this super safe asset for them to invest in. They're dependent on us, not the other way around.
So if money isn't the real limit, what is? Well, according to MMT, the actual limits are, real. We're talking about actual stuff. Do we have enough skilled people, enough raw materials, enough clean energy to do what we want to do? The government can and should spend until it starts to run out of those real resources to buy. That's the true constraint. That's the point where just printing more money causes inflation.
So, if you accept this whole framework, you can see how it leads to a totally different vision for what our economy and our politics could be about. The goals themselves can completely change.
Murphy calls this idea a politics of care. Instead of being obsessed with a national debt clock or balancing a make-believe budget, the government's focus could shift to things that actually matter, like making sure everyone who wants a job can find one, building a green future, and creating a society where people aren't constantly afraid of getting sick, losing their home, or growing old.
And that's really what this all boils down to. Modern monetary theory leaves us with this one final, really powerful question to think about. If a lack of money isn't the real problem, then what should our actual priorities be? If we've been arguing over the wrong limits this whole time, it opens up a much, much bigger conversation about what kind of society we actually want to build.